2844 Food Truck Freedom Bill.
All right, so we are going to lose our quorum here at about 10:45, so we've got to go pretty quickly to work through everything that we need to get through today. On this first page, Garrett, I don't know if you grabbed the stuff from Tess. Tess, will you? You do? Okay, perfect. Okay. We were on page 3. We had stopped around the food truck multi-vendor sites at the last meeting. So that's where we're gonna pick it up. I think the last part of our discussion at the last meeting was if we needed to determine a size in the same way that we do for like RV parks require 2 acres. Do we want a food multi-vendor site to have a minimum square footage requirement, or do we just want to say whatever you can fit in there with your food trucks and your parking, as long as you meet the requirements, we have no minimum size?
The likely location is going to be at commercial zoning.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these lots are bigger anyway. With administrative approval, we're already setting up guardrails to make sure that people aren't setting up food trucks in their front yards.
Right.
Right. So if you consider the average lot size is 5,000 in town, I mean, would we want to put a 5,000 foot limitation on it, or just say if you can fit it, you can do it?
I think we need to have some type of structure to it. I don't think it ought to just be a free for all.
Sure.
You
No,
know.
I don't. No, definitely, we're not going the free for all route. But if you've got a 5,000 square foot lot and you've got 2 small food trucks, and let's say we come up with parking requirements that you have to have 10 parking spaces for those, is that okay to have a multi-vendor site with just 2 food trucks on one lot? Or do we want to say, like for an RV park, you can have one RV parked on your property, but the minute you have 2 there, you're considered an RV park and you have to have 2 acres or else you're not meeting the ordinance. So that was done probably in a way to limit the number of RVs you could have.
Sure.
Do we want to do something that limits the food trucks, multiple food trucks on one lot to a certain size, provided they can meet all the other requirements? Or do we want to have size standard in there all the time regardless?
Wouldn't having to meet the requirements kind of like fall back on the side? I mean, that's kind of saying the same thing, right? I mean, if you
It just depends on how much ambiguity you want to deal with on the staff level.
Right. And that's okay. So, I mean, like, think about an RV park. So an RV park is required to be 2 acres.
right.
You could make an RV park that meets all of the requirements of our ordinance much smaller than that if we didn't have that 2 acre limit in.
Mhm.
So it really comes down to, do you want to see more than 1 food truck on a small lot, or do you want to limit it to 1 food truck? My opinion is if they can meet all the standard requirements, then they should be able to put them on there. But I could also make the argument for, limiting the number. The same way we limit RV parks, or the same way we limit dwelling units on a piece of property.
I just kind of still feel like I agree with you. I mean, if they can meet all the requirements, then that in itself is gonna kind of dictate their size limitation.
I would think you'd want to, if there's going to be restrictions in that manner, you'd want it to limit the size. You want to limit the number. Even if it met all the parking requirements and everything, you don't necessarily want 10 food trucks in one area. The idea is to kind of have food availability, spread out a little more.
But I definitely think food truck parks, like we've seen in
Yeah.
other places where they do have 10,
Yeah.
10 units on 1 acre piece of property, isn't appropriate.
Depending on where it is,
We don't have a whole lot of acre properties,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
I have a piece of property on precinct 1 and I'm looking to put 10 trucks,
and
41,000 square.
my take on it was not in the middle of town where, there's gonna be a bunch of cars coming in and out, and as long as the parking's there, it could be as big as it needs to be. You just don't want that in the middle or where it's gonna cause congestion.
Yeah,
So,
traffic flow.
So it's gonna be difficult to limit it. Like, I think we need to come up with a standard that's a certain size standard, and that's everywhere in town, regardless of where you are. If we want it to be a minimum size, we decide what that minimum size is, and you have to meet these requirements. Or we just say, you can do it as long as you meet the parking requirements, as long as you meet the setback requirements, and not put that size limit on.
So if we look at the example of the Barton Springs Park that I went and visited, and that was an acre lot and it had 8 or 9, could have fit 10,
Right.
ample amounts of parking. Why don't we just just say, well, one trailer for every, what, it would have to be 4,000 square feet?
Yeah, I mean, we could limit it like that. I would probably suggest that we use 5,000 because that's what we use for dwelling unit size.
One per 5,000?
Okay, now that is gonna take the people that have a 5,000 square foot lot that could legitimately fit 2 food trucks and whatever parking requirements that would prevent them from doing that. To just make sure you know that that's kind of the consequence of limiting it to size, which I'm fine with. And it,
Just like you spoke to the park that you went to. I think the general ordinance on those is a space, given their space, say maybe a 20 by 50 space. And there's a 10-foot space in between those spaces, that's pretty relative to where you're at, what you're looking at,
Right.
and we'll still have the parking. I'm with y'all, I want control and I want good governance in it, but at the same time. It's site specific and with the ordinance are already structured as we spoke earlier, are setback limitations. For visiting. I think all of those are relative per site. While we should have guidance. Should we limit ourselves with something that's specific and non-negotiable, or should we have something that promotes the actual business itself? It's
So-
latitude given to both parties.
I think speaking to what he's saying, setting a specific size limit would be limiting. If we set requirements that you have to meet. And you have to meet those requirements, that's kind of self-regulating. If
Mhm.
you've got a food truck that requires 10 parking spaces, you probably can't fit another one on the property.
Right.
But if you have a food truck and that model only requires 2 or 3 parking spaces, you probably could fit a second one and make them fit the requirements too. So I just need direction on you guys on whether or not we need to set a minimum like RV parks, or we just set regulations that they have to meet.
Well, I know in some of the other city ordinances, because I read quite a few different cities that have had food trucks in the past. It seemed like kind of the overall was a 1 acre lot minimum for a park.
Right.
And a lot of them also have like a park manager who's responsible for the cleanup and to make sure everything's parked correctly.
Sure, and that's similar to what we do with commercial establishments, and you've got the property owner, the person that's in charge.
Right.
That we communicate with.
But in the case of this gentleman here, he's 41,000 feet, not 44,000. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to have a park if we did that, because
Correct,
he's not an acre.
right,
I'm 953. I mitigate, I'll have an acre, but an actual acre, and I would hate to have to be put into that situation, but in need I would.
Yeah.
and so,
Well, that's just a suggestion I know from some of the others that I have read.
What's the easy button on the city side?
having a minimum. Lot size makes it very easy to tell people that they can't do something.
Hmm.
You can't have a food truck park, you don't, you have almost an acre, you don't have that. So if that is the overriding goal, that would be the easiest way to achieve that. Having requirements that you have to meet probably is more business friendly. Because there's lots of different ways you can meet different requirements without having that size limit.
Me personally, I just think you should have the requirements.
I agree.
I mean, it just, I'm also, want to promote business here, so,
So how about this? How about I write it that way, that just, we don't set a minimum size right now. I'll write something in there that, says that we're thinking about that minimum size requirement. And then we'll come up with, and Felicia and I had started working on some drawings to show how many different situations you can have with individual food trucks on vacant property of different sizes. And so why don't we come back to this topic at the meeting on the 26th?
Sure.
And look at the solid examples and say, is this something we want? Is this something we want? Do we think this works? And make that decision at that meeting.
And can I ask him, can I ask you a question? Like, when you say mitigate, is that like what do you mean? It's like
I hate to have to go through that process.
right, okay.
Like I say, it's 41,000 plus. That should be sufficient size for a food truck. If I could put a food truck on a residential lot, I would think that should be no obstruction to me putting nothing on a commercial lot.
So I guess we all know about mitigation, right? And I would almost in that instance think that, for the overall health of maybe the community or whatever, it's probably better to not start mitigating wetlands so people can put more food trucks here.
At the same time, like I say, I had 41,000
Right.
square feet. If you give me an acre restriction, I'll mitigate.
That's what see, I think there's probably more than just this one instance where that would probably be is that fair enough, you think, Nicole,
I do.
to assume?
And I'm right on the water on the verge of.
Okay, so I'm writing this in with no minimum size requirement, but an asterisk to make us revisit this with the examples at the next meeting.
Cool.
Okay, so city public vendor concessionaires was the next topic. I think we're gonna have more meetings with Parks and Rec with city manager between now and our next meeting to determine kind of how that will look. So we'll write that section of the ordinance based on the policies that they kind of want to have in place. But that section was added in because you guys did want to have a venue and a public space for a food truck to possibly be
Right.
with city permission.
The parking lot.
Yeah, it's very traffic. That's very traffic.
We keep pushing that parking lot.
For everything.
Make some money off that dang
Agreed.
thing.
Agreed. So if we go into the next section, it says Article 3 districts. So this is the next section that is gonna have to be revamped to make our zoning requirements align with our food truck wishes. So I've written some pretty basic sections in on page 3 under TR1. That's the first district that you guys said at our initial meeting that you wanted to allow types of food trucks. Those types of food trucks are what are considered the type 1 mobile food trucks, which is like a convenience store, packaged items, soda cans, bags of chips, easy come and go, like a vending machine. Food truck is what we were calling it. So in TR1 districts, we only allow those vending machine kind of food trucks. No food handling, no keeping things at temperature, very basic. And that aligns with kind of the restaurant use that was allowed in that. They could have little vending machines, things like that to benefit the complex. This just translates that into the food truck portion. Moving down to TR2, you guys said at our initial meeting that you wanted the same allowances for food trucks that a restaurant would be allowed in that zone. So that is type 1, 2, and 3 mobile food vendors, as long as they have the authorization from us so that they meet all the requirements that we set and that they do not sell alcohol. So in TR2, you could have those uses, cafes and restaurants, but no alcohol was allowed. Then TR3 would be the same thing, would allow the same kind of uses as the TR2.
Still no alcohol?
Still no alcohol.
TR3
Doesn't
still
say
does
it's
not allow for,
alcohol.
correct, still does not, right. TR2 is without, it specifically says without alcohol sales. TR2 or TR3 says any use allowed in a TR2. So you're not allowed to have a bar in a TR2. You're not allowed to have a bar in a TR3. Moving down to commercial 1, we wanted to keep those same commercial 1 regulations. So if they had an RV park or a condo association, they could have those types of food trucks that would allow, but no additional allowances in the C1. C2, we would allow all of those uses. So if you look at number 38, type 1, 2, or 3 mobile food vendors or a mobile food vendor, multi-vendor site. So food truck parks can only be in C2 properties. So that's the big restriction. So that was the easiest portion of the ordinance, right? What we wanted to allow where. So now we'll skip to the third section, which is the chapter, another chapter 25 amendment that is in regards to parking. So if you guys will skip down to the table, and I think it's highlighted in red.
I meant, oh,
There we go.
this,
Yep.
No, the other one. There should be a third one.
this one?
Yes.
Okay.
There's this page.
This one.
Yep. Gotcha.
It was one page forward. I could see it. One more.
That is.
We're at the table.
Okay, the red table. This is parking standards. So we had discussed different parking standards depending on the size of the food truck on the property, plus additional parking standards whenever they had seating available. So I did some research and there's some different sizes of food trailers that are pretty popular. Under 18 feet is probably the most popular. Then 18 to 30 feet is probably the second most popular. And then you have a varied, you've got from 30 feet to I saw 100-foot trailer. So, you know, big time differences there. So initially we talked about 3 parking spaces required for the smaller food trucks, plus 1 space for every 4 seats that they had available. So if you have 1 small food truck on your property and 4 picnic tables, you would have to have 3 for the food truck and 1 for each of the picnic tables. So a total of 7. We did the same kind of thing for food trucks that were 18 to 30 feet, except we increased it by 1 parking space. So it's 4 just for the food truck if you have no seating, and then 1 for every 4 seats you have in seating after that. Now the 30-foot and over trailers are very different. Some of them are just long trailers with 1 serving window at the end. Some of these are long trailers with multiple serving windows that can have different types of food in each window. Some of I mean, there's just so much that I don't think we could write a rule that's very specific to every single kind. So my suggestion for the food trailers that were over 30 feet is that we start with a minimum of 4, but then we leave it up to the administrator to kind of look at that food truck and the idea of what we're going for. And that administrator, you know, kind of makes the requirement up from there. Then still the 1 parking space for every 4 seats that you need. This way, if somebody comes in with a 100-foot trailer that has 4 serving windows, we can look at that differently than a 100-foot trailer with 1 serving window, because you have a different crowd in those situations.
So that's where you would adjust the minimum.
That's where, correct. That's so in the section on the end that says plus possible additional spaces as determined by administrator. That's pretty standard in other sections of our parking ordinance. If you go down to where restaurant, about 3 spaces down there, our requirement is 1 for every 4 seats. But if somebody left a giant portion of their restaurant open and it's like, this is just mingling, people can stand around and do stuff. We can, as the administrator, we can look at that plan overall and say, you still need parking for this area because you're going to have people here. And so we can determine how many parking spaces they need. So the precedent of kind of letting somebody in my position or somebody in the building department position to determine the number of parking spaces required for those unique situations is pretty well set.
Right.
We, you know,
So
for
like say-
Shipyard, we had to look at that differently than we looked at a different restaurant because it's a different animal. They're trying to apply these hard, fast rules into a unique situation becomes problematic. So that's why I left it like.
So what would be your take on that? Like 1 extra parking per window or?
I would probably look at the trailer that they came, and if they had a 100-foot trailer that had 4 windows, I would maybe look at that and say, okay, is this similar to really 1 food truck? Or is this similar to 4 food trucks, and kind of make the determination there?
No.
So, I mean, we would have to look at a number of things, where it was in town. I mean, in that situation, that's where we would take all of those differences and, you know, what we know about kind of parking demand and places in town and what works and what
And if
doesn't.
we see
That's
a-
when we would take that and fairly decide how many parking spaces they needed beyond that 4.
And if you see a mass influx of 100-foot trailers, then, and
Correct.
at that point in time, we might revisit things and come up with a standard.
I think it's gonna be pretty rare. I don't think we're gonna see a lot of
Yeah.
over 30-foot trailers, just because of, you know,
And we're,
So, lot requirements.
right.
we're assuming that the longer the trailer, the more food
People.
and more people, but that's not necessarily true. Should we look at it as maybe the number of serving windows per trailer?
On the other ones or just the ones over 30?
Any of them?
So you think even the,
I mean, the length of the trailer is almost arbitrary.
Sometimes I think though, like, it's like the size of your kitchen. You can definitely cook more in a bigger kitchen than you could in a smaller place. And the faster you can turn over food, the more people you're likely to have there. So I think that size of the trailer does factor in minimally.
I think he's got a good point there, especially once you get over the 18.
Mhm.
Maybe a 30-foot, but you'd already increased it by
Right.
1 anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, a 100-foot trailer might not turn out more food than an 18-foot trailer, but I think that's where we would have to look at those unique circumstances when those people are coming in.
So like if you had a 18 to 30-foot that had 3 serving windows, is it still gonna be just 4, or is that something y'all are gonna?
Right now, it would just be that 4, unless we wrote something in that allowed the administrator to look at every size trailer and kind of make those additional
I
determinations.
mean, there,
Or could you add that same possible additional spaces as determined by administrator to that section?
I can.
I mean, is it gonna happen? Probably not, but if
Better to
it
be safe than
does,
sorry.
yes, that way you have the flexibility there.
Yeah. How does everybody else feel about that?
Good with it.
Okay. So I'll write that language into there. Now we need to talk about food truck parks and the parking requirements there. So there's a couple of different ways we can look at that. We can just say, you know, every added food truck is the added parking requirement. That's how we do for multiple commercial businesses on one lot. You add up all of their uses into one parking requirement. Or we could say this food truck park is a different animal than just 10 individual food trucks, where you might not have to keep compounding the number of parking spots that you need. So I would say we go in one of 2 directions. We either say for every food truck, you need 3 parking spots plus parking for sitting for seats, or we reduce that number because you've got multiple food trucks on one lot and you might have one family that's coming for food for 2 food trucks. So it's more of a shared parking arrangement there.
makes sense.
So something like that would be, could be, you know, 1 parking space for every food truck plus a certain number of parking spaces, like kind of like our 1 per bedroom plus 2 for our occupancy and short-term rentals. Food truck parking requirements could be something like 1 parking space per food truck plus 2 overall, plus 1 for every 4 seats that you have. So to take his example, if he had 10 food trucks, if we did them individually, that would be 30 parking spaces for those food trucks, plus 1 parking space for every 4 seats that he had. If we did like a shared parking thing, that would be 1 parking space for every food truck, so 10 plus whatever number we determine needs to be that plus. So for example, if it was 2 right now, 10 parking spaces for his food trucks plus 2, so 12 parking spaces plus 1 for every 4 seats that he had there. My opinion, I think that a second choice is the better way to go, because I think parking demand is going to be less with 10 food trucks in one location than if you had individual food trucks all over.
There would be no distinction between the type of use. So like in the case of that Barton Springs Park, everything was a food truck except for 1, which was a barber shop. So would the barber shop be treated the same?
So this ordinance does not specifically make us allow for all types of mobile vending. State law that passed is specific to food truck mobile vending.
Okay,
So initially, my thought was just to limit it to mobile food trucks
okay,
and not to give up our permanent building for commercial activity established for all types of business.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to see all of our retail shops be reduced to trailer size shops
Right.
all over town. So the good news is the state law does not require us to open that up for everything. It just requires us
Just for
to open
food
it up
trucks.
for food trucks. So
And I vote to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right now, we wouldn't allow for a food truck park to have food trucks that didn't sell food.
So in this food truck park, so is parking going, I understand your 12 ton, but what if you have a lot of trucks with 3 windows? How is that still gonna revert back to like this when they're on a single lot? Or are we gonna count that as aggregate?
You guys tell me.
I would like to add something to it. You know, just like the food truck court, we're working on the premise that they're going to come, they're going to park, they're going to sit, and they're going to eat. This is gonna operate also as a, just like an example of the Waterbury.
Mhm.
There's going to be a lot of people that are come, get their order, and they're going to leave. They're not going to convert. And until we actually see what the response is, how the traffic flow is, maybe we sidetrack that or set it aside till we see.
We definitely need rules in place
You need
before we
rules and
start.
structure, and you already have that.
Yeah.
In the placement with the tables, et cetera, et
Sure.
cetera. But, you know, just like on for me, the fact that a business, whether they're a little bit larger or smaller, the 18-foot or the 30-foot or whatever, the number of windows that they have, the only thing that number of window has is that the customer is gonna be served quickly. And I don't see that as a bad thing.
No, it's definitely not a bad
No,
thing,
it's-
but it does lead for more people to be served in a smaller amount of time, which would increase your parking requirements.
That's
And
that's
I
where
say
that.
I agree completely with what you discussed up to this point.
Mhm.
But as far as, you know, it's just,
And maybe we put that same,
Sure, I mean, yeah, we could say that the
That same
administrator
wording
can
in
look
there.
at,
Some sort of a review.
Yeah. and that way, that gives us some leeway if. You know, he does have 10 food trucks that have 3 windows each that serve people so fast that we've got hundreds of people there, we could increase that parking requirement without changing an entire ordinance.
right,
Right.
and I think we need to leave ourselves open to that.
I agree 100%.
I think it'll be interesting to see the lease terms that the property owners who are proposing to have these parks and stuff sign with the vendors that come, because if this is like an evolving thing that's changing on a weekly basis, the city is going to have a lot of time.
And
In
when you say
reviewing.
changing on a weekly basis, what do you mean? Like
Oh, let's say
different food
that
truck coming into a private property?
like a
every
different,
week.
that's right. Like what if in this gentleman's case, you know, he's like, look, I can make a lot more money if I rent for a week than a month. I mean, that's what happens with the short-term rentals, right? So, you know, if you have that kind of turnover, and if you're getting an 18-foot long food truck, then you're getting a 30-foot long food truck, then you're getting 100-foot with 3 windows, and then, you know, and he's got 10 spaces and he's got turnover every week or say 2 or even once a month, right?
Sure.
Or, I mean, that's a lot of work for the city to have to review all of that. I mean, in my humble opinion, that's like a position in and of itself,
It could be.
you know? And so, you know, and I don't know, I don't know what the answer to any of that is, but I,
What's your business model? Do you want to rent per month or?
My business model is I already have 6 people that are ready to sign, and I'm looking to keep them there full time. I'm not-
for
So
like, what's your
lease
list?
term?
You see a food it's not producing, they're not.
But what's your term of the lease agreement that you're going to sign with these people?
I will do month to month, no less than month to month,
Okay.
and I'm looking for annual.
For what?
I'm looking for annual.
And I know some of these, they have 6-month certificate, you know, the people sign up for the 6 months. Now that if something falls out and they have to move, of course, there's always some flexibility there. But the initial onset, or whenever you apply for your certificate and you show where everything's gonna be parked, you know, is like a 6 months. So if you have a 18 foot and a 30 and a 30, say this 18 doesn't work and you bring a 30 in, you're gonna have to redo to be in, you see what I'm saying, to be in compliance with
Yeah.
the distance and everything.
You know, the way that I'm looking at it, guys, and I'm sure y'all see it the same. This island is very profitable for anyone that's running a business during the season.
Mhm.
The-
Well, and we need the
traffic-
help.
The traffic flow here is absolutely phenomenal. And the people that want to come and vend, they're looking to hook into this, guys. They're
Yeah.
looking for a place to find it to be and to do their business. I personally, if you're not looking long term, then I'm not interested in talking to you, not the vending. If you're coming here to serve the community and contribute to the park and its success, I'm all about your business.
And I think-
They gotta figure out how to make all their money for a year and 3 months like the rest of us.
I would imagine that we won't see such fast turnover at first. So
Mhm.
that at least gives us time to get this whole, system down and under our belts so that when we do maybe see that quicker turnover of places, we'll be more practiced in it and it will go fairly quickly. But it's a lot of work for them to turn it over every week. I mean, our permitting process is 2 weeks typically, so they would have to be planning so far in ahead. But I just think the amount of trouble that they would have to go to do that might not be worth it to the property owners.
I know that the vendors that we have spoken to, they have voiced consistently and across sector that they're looking for a park where they can come in, they can leave their equipment safe and secure.
Yeah.
They don't have.
And I think that's,
The move for them is just as disruptive as it would be
Yeah.
for everyone.
and I think that's what I've seen in the food truck parks that I've looked at in Austin is that they're pretty consistent. They're
Yeah.
not changing out very
Right.
often. We could write something, if it becomes a problem, we could write something that this approval is good for the month and you can't swap it out with something else.
I can
month.
call that one across from Peter Pan Mini Golf.
Mhm.
They had leasing information, maybe just see what they do before
Yeah.
the next meeting.
That would be great.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
As I told Nicole in the beginning, when we first started talking about this, we're more than happy to, open our business. If y'all wanna look, you wanna see the flow, you wanna see the returns, any kind of information y'all want. We're more than happy to sit down and talk about it. We're not, we're trying to make this prosperous for all.
Okay, so getting back to the parking for food truck parks. How are we feeling about that?
Well, something else right quick.
Mhm.
And I know with the restaurants, you include, it doesn't matter, you don't have X amount of employees, X amount or patrons, you just have X amount per seat. So whenever we're looking at this, we gotta keep in mind of that too.
So are you suggesting
Well,
to
when-
add parking spaces for employees?
No, I'm saying to have that statement put in there that we have the flexibility
Okay,
to increase it. Because, you got 10 trailers and let's say everyone drove together. You got 10 people that need to park somewhere. Then where's your parking for the people who are actually coming to buy the food?
In that 10 foot, in that 20 feet behind that trailer on my property line.
mhm.
And maybe so, that's why we need to see they need to see the plats and stuff. But that's one of my concerns is to make sure that y'all are profitable, that you have enough parking for your people to get in to actually buy the product.
So I would probably need to have a conversation with the city attorney on language that would allow us to approve something and then require more a little bit later to see how that would go. So I'll
Okay.
have that conversation before we come back. and
But
see
that's
what
my
kind of
main
language.
concern.
Like maybe if it was coupled with the opportunity to require less, it'd be considered more tenable.
Say it again.
So you might find in your study that it actually requires less parking.
Yeah.
So,
So-
I have a concern about the ingress and egress. If the food truck mobile vending becomes a quick lunch, dinner, eating situation, right? And there's a lot of in and out, in and out. All those places in town have multiple entrances to get in and out of. What I would hate to see is you have whatever the square footage is, whether it's 2 trucks, whether it's 10 trucks. There's one way in, there's one way out, and you have constant traffic and people are trying to get in and out all the time. Whataburger, you can get in and out 3 different ways. Dairy Queen, you know, all those places, right? And that's great because people need that. They need to be able to go and get something quick. And that's the whole premise of having that food truck, right? A mobile vending. But we need to, I think, also regulate how that piece of property has ingress and egress, maybe even require 2 ways to get in and out of the property if possible, and have that comply with parking. Because that's gonna be super important because you can't have, you know, say you limit it to 15 spots for 10 food trucks and they're all trying to get in and park diagonally. They're not gonna all get out and you're gonna have 10 F-350s and Suburbans and SUVs. So I think that we have some real consideration about that. And I do agree with you, Brenda. You have 10 food trucks and there are 20 people that work, because it's, you know, at least probably 2 people that work in every food truck. That's possibly 20 cars if you only have 30 spots in the front, you know. Because not everybody's maybe like this gentleman who's decided to put employee parking in the back. That's gonna be a real problem for you know, for the actual people who come. So I think that needs to be considered.
So our restaurant requirements right now only do it by seats in restaurants, not employees of restaurants. And I think that they've had, they've-
A lot of those places.
exactly, they've had to go beyond that.
And you have to learn some history.
Correct.
Determined by DOT. Like,
What?
DOT.
It depends on where your location is. Not everybody is on the state highway.
That's.
And we can still have, yeah, we can,
Keeping in mind, you've got up to 300 feet, you can only have one, at 300 feet, you can have 2.
I understand where it's located, but that's why it needs to be considered and needs to be looked at, because the last thing we need to do is cause further congestion, whether it's in town, out of town, or a potential accident situation, or you create a food truck lot in town and it's already in a congested area. And all of a sudden you have not enough parking within the food truck park, and now everyone's on the street and it's taking up on-street parking and causing congestion. I'm just saying, all those things we need to think about before we even let the cat out of the bag.
100%. So, what I'll do is meet with the fire marshal prior to our next meeting to kind of talk about ingress and egress of those locations. I think we'll have to be creative with it and figure out how the flow internally works. And maybe let that dictate how many, because to his point, on his acre property, they're not going to give him 2 entrances on and off the highway. So maybe his traffic flow internally has to look much different than a regular location would.
Yeah. Across the top.
Okay.
And that's completely different from 5,000 square foot lot. You're not gonna
Right.
have the ability to put 2 entrances. And
Correct.
it's coming in one side and leaving the other side.
Yeah,
you know.
and so in some of those, it would limit the ability to have that, but then maybe that's where we take a different parking flow internally.
And that may limit the amount of construction you can have on the lot.
Exactly.
You know, we need to think about all those things as a cohesive group.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of having a park instead of, 50 food trucks scattered around town. I think a park's a great idea, but we need to make sure it works,
Realistically, and not just on paper.
not just don't pick that.
Okay, so parking requirements for food truck parks. How are you guys feeling about that? Certain number per food truck, certain number for the park in general. My
I like the
initial
food truck and
suggestion-
then end tables.
My suggestion was a certain number of parking spots per food truck, whether that be 1 per food truck, 2 per food truck. And then adding a flat amount, adding an additional 2 or an additional 4, so that you've got your people, your employees, those kind of extra spots,
And then you're
And
gonna
then-
add for a seat.
and then add for seating,
And for 1 per table.
1 per 4 seats.
Per 4
which is
seats.
Standard in our restaurant.
Okay.
And then like 2 parking per food truck.
So you tell me, let's say a food truck on an acre park with 10 food trucks and 20 tables of 4. So that would be, if we did 2 per food truck, it would be 20 plus 20 for those
That'd be 40
tables, or 40 parking spaces for those 10 food trucks. And then that's not even if we wanted to add a flat amount in, +4, +5. That's a lot. I mean, do we need that many? Do we not need that many? Would a reduction of 1 per food truck make sense in that situation where it's 30?
How does that fact check against that acre park we keep referring to off Barton Springs?
That was
Because
81 parking spots. I couldn't find any, and there weren't that many aerial photos that showed parking in there. I couldn't find any aerial shot that showed it more than half full.
yeah, because it had ample amounts of parking at
We
a
had
busy
80 We
lunchtime.
had 81 parking spots.
It was like half the acre was
It-
not, didn't
like
have any buildings on it. It was
90%.
Yeah.
The trucks were in one very small
Yeah.
space and the rest was all parking.
I,
And so what we're proposing right now is just half of that.
Mhm.
I agree with your theory that you have multiple vendors and you're gonna have people, 4 people in a car, I'm going over here and I'm going over here. You see it at the shipyard, everybody goes there and I don't know if everybody at my party's ever ordered the same thing.
We have strip centers where they have, they share their parking, so it's done by square footage, no matter what your use is there. So it's that same idea. If somebody goes to a strip center, they're visiting multiple places, not just one. So you guys tell me,
So
1 parking space per,
maybe-
2 parking spaces per,
Maybe something to start with, because I know we're running short on time, is 2 per unit and then same on
On the table.
the tables, one
One.
space. And that at least gives us a place to start. That doesn't mean that's
Yes.
what it's gonna be.
If you work with a minimum, you give yourself some latitude to review. I mean, that's only.
Because on a normal, up to 18, we require 3. So maybe we do it by the size of them.
that becomes problematic when they're,
Okay.
it just
Well, that's why I'm
becomes
asking.
more difficult to enforce because I don't wanna tell
Yeah,
him.
it'd be hard for him to have 10, 30 foot, and then all of a sudden he only has 18.
Yeah, I don't wanna have to change that parking requirement, so I just say we do it by number, it makes enforcement much
So I
better.
would say 2 to 3 per truck.
Mhm.
And then 1 per every 4 seats.
Okay, so that's
That's just my.
2 would be a reduction from what we require for individual food trucks, that's the 3, so I think that is fair. I mean, I think you can make the argument that that's fair for shared.
Yeah,
For
I
shared
think it's fair.
usage.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna write it as 2 per unit plus 1 for every 4 seats. Do we wanna add a flat amount in besides the 2 for every unit? For the manager of a park or employee use?
Or just.
I think it
a
would-
number that keys are reviewed. Rather than any.
Just put it in there and then we'll do a little more search on it.
Okay,
A flat use.
a suggestion that I would have would be to allow for stacked parking for employee use only. I think that is useful
good
in a
point.
commercial location. Similar to how we do for residential, because if you guys all work there, you can get somebody to move your car to get your car out, and it reduces the amount of land that we're using for parking for cars that are gonna be parked there for 8 or 10 hours at a time.
You might also consider having designated 15-minute zones or something.
Oh, that's a good
For the
idea.
people who wanna go to the food truck, but know that the tables are full. The food truck has capacity to feed a lot more people, but the tables are full because those people are choosing to stay, but for the people who wanna go in, get their taco and leave.
Do you think,
You ought to consider having like in front of Subway, they have their own self-police sign that says, curbside zone, like Whataburger does
Right.
too. You
sure,
might consider having a certain amount of spaces in a food park for in and out.
do you think we dictate that, or do you think we let those businesses dictate that for themselves? Because
Yeah,
that's a
that's-
really smart idea for somebody to have those to-go spots, like to-go only. But is it something that we want to enforce and proceed, or just good business models?
Part of your parking problems, because if he or anybody else who creates a park doesn't have that. If I drive by and I see there's no place to park, but there's nobody in line in a food truck, then I'm gonna keep going and I'm not even going to that park.
I
Yeah.
think we need to designate.
We're exploring the possibilities of delivery.
And that's a whole different animal.
Yeah, that's a whole new. animal.
So what my fear would be is that if we mandate to-go zones, do we have to enforce that, on if people are staying there longer? what if you don't have, what if everybody's eating there and nobody's taking to go and then you're lacking these
You
food
just kind of have
spots?
to leave that.
And
up to the-
I
Who's
wonder
gonna
if
sit there and
it's,
time it?
yeah, I wonder if it's a good idea to suggest it to all of these businesses that open up, that they have those spots, but maybe not mandate it.
Well, I think to mandate it is okay.
I do
And
too.
I've been guilty of 20-minute parking in a 15-minute zone, you know, but I know, it's
In the back of
clock's
your
ticking.
mind, you're thinking
Yeah,
about it. though.
right. It's
So
like,
now-
I gotta get something to
So
eat.
then we would also now need to
know.
decide out of your 40 parking spaces, how many are mandated to be to go only?
39.
I saw you,
It's just a suggestion to be able to, again, to make sure that each one of these spots has sufficient parking.
Mhm.
So that not only can their business thrive and do better, but that we're not creating an issue.
Well,
So what about if we do something like our 2 per unit plus 1 for every 4 seats and then have a set number that we highly that so two for every food truck plus 1 for every 4 seats that you have plus 5 for every food truck park.
Or what-
And we
10% of the total parking is for,
To go.
to
There
go.
you go.
See, I like what
That's
Bill's,
easy.
I like that, because then it's like, okay, we got 30 spots, 3 of them are,
Or you got.
3 of them are
40.
15.
so a minimum of 10% of the parking spots have to be for to go only.
A minimum.
And then they can make the best business model on if they want to increase that or not.
No, there again, guys, I use my input on this. If you have basic regulations on the parking per truck, per table, you already have the structure there. As far as, and the parking that's allocated, it's by those parameters, that is acceptable. Any variance in that, you should have review ability. And I would think that would be case by case.
But to go back and add more after the fact is a lot.
It's hard.
difficult.
Yes.
You can't enlarge your property.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think we need to start out
For us
with
to
it.
tell somebody, you gotta take the trailer right now because you need more parking.
Yeah, and I also don't want to be of the person that's deciding what's allowed and what's not allowed and not be consistent and solid.
Okay,
Well, I understand, but when you don't have solid regulations and you just have somebody that's making their own determination subjectively, that's a very dangerous precedent.
If we're working with here, I think it's,
yeah,
you know, there should be oversight and there should be the mechanism to engage from the city and for the owner.
I think we need the designated
regulation.
areas and then whoever the manager of the park is, it's up to them to make sure it's regulated.
Yes,
And then another thing-
Food, I have a person sitting in that seat eating. I don't want to rush him, but I want them to leave, so
Yeah.
someone else can sit down.
I don't want our code enforcement to start getting calls that says, hey, this guy's been parked for 19 minutes in a 15-minute zone, because we can't just be like, okay, sorry, and not enforce something that we write something in. So I'm gonna write in 10% to go spots,
Minimum.
and then we can kind of all think and ruminate on that and
Discuss it at the
come back.
next meeting.
Yeah. So minimum 10%.
Right,
But there's one other elephant in the room we haven't talked about, and that's handicap parking.
those are set by standards.
Okay.
I mean, that's just a
That's
state
gonna be
state
automatic.
law. It's gonna be
That'll
automatic.
be in addition to what we come up with.
Correct, and that's
Okay.
the same, I know you were talking to me about parking surfaces and stuff, we already have those standards
Okay.
set in our ordinance. We would require the same standards for these parking spots that we would for a restaurant, that we would for a retail establishment. Those standards are set,
Okay, like the gravel or whatever.
correct, and I'm gonna sneak in one more little quick thought real quick before Garrett has to go. Food vendors like the hot dog lady. Do we want to treat them like a regular food truck and have the same parking requirements, or because it's a cart, because it's
Had we
something
not-
smaller? We haven't really.
Hmm.
So my opinion is that we probably need a reduction in those food carts, that we define them very well. Have some kind of a smaller requirement.
Maybe we put in our next meeting that we look into that.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do, because the next meeting I really want to have stuff written. I'm gonna write something that feels appropriate for those food carts. And then I'll leave that part highlighted and make that a big discussion
A
point.
cart would fall into the type 2.
Sometimes not. So the hot dog cart might not be a type 1, it might be a type 2 where it's just keeping it, but I also,
It's
I
not
mean-
really a type 1 if they're actually.
yeah, in New York, I've seen food carts that could be considered a type 3, you know, and I just don't want to leave ambiguity in our ordinance. Okay, all right, sorry to cut you guys short again today. I will write everything after I get back from my vacation next week and
Sounds good.
we'll
Did you have your-
regroup at the 26th meeting. Plan on that meeting being a long one.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about today. Apologize for being
Mike's
late.
excited because now he gets to go to the,
I get to make the elementary picnic.
That's where I'm going to.
yes, I will try to see,
Like-
how do you guys feel about starting at 2 instead of 3 on
That's
the
what I was gonna say.
26th?
Better.
Either 1 or 2,
Okay,
because that way we're not rushed again with the 3 to 5, because I
Sure.
know what happened last time.
okay, so that's what I'll do. I'll
And if we
suggest,
get through early, great.
I'll suggest to everybody that we start at 2. We shouldn't have anything else. I don't know for sure. Stuff could still come in today, so we might have something else on the agenda, but this might be likely the only thing that we have on the agenda.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, if we could.
All right.
The 26th at 2, but pay attention. I'm not committing to the 2 o'clock until I talk to other people. So I don't want to have any kind of quorum issue at that meeting. I want to sit and talk about it until we're done talking about it.
Right.
That's why I thought maybe if we start earlier.
Okay,
All right. Adjourn at 11:02.
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry.
I always feel weird banging that damn
All right.
thing.
You silly goose.
Oh.